Welcome to Direction Northeast. Hello, I'm Montez Burke. This program is a presentation of the Communications Department of Northeast State Community College. In this episode of Direction Northeast, in honor of Black History Month, we'll look at changes in the Black and white communities and how they measure to Dr. King's vision of racial harmony. Our guests for this program are two African American professors from Northeast State. First, to my left, is Reverend Charlton, and to his left, Mr. Sherman Patrick. Gentlemen, welcome to Direction Northeast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our family gets together nearly every weekend. We laugh together, we enjoy each other, we have quality time together, and Northeast State has afforded us those opportunities. I'm a graduate of Northeast State, and my husband's a graduate of Northeast State, and both of our children chose to go to Northeast State. And I think it's because it provided us with an affordable quality education, and it was a wonderful experience. I'm Susan Graybill, and our whole family got our start at Northeast State.
Gentlemen, thank you all for attending here today. I want to start with you, Reverend Charlton. How did you get your start here at Northeast State, and what is your position here?
Okay, I came here, I was at East Tennessee State University. I ran the CASA program, which was protecting young people, children in court system situations and helping them. And I also found that there was an opening here, and I applied. And that's how I got it. And I teach Humanities 1, Humanities 2, I teach reading, and I teach Black Studies.
Okay, Mr. Patrick?
Well, I actually had a conversation with the former president here, Dr. William Law. He knew I had a master's degree in history, and there was an opening here at least to teach as an adjunct, and he asked me to do that. And so from then on, I've been at Northeast State. It'll be my 13th year. I teach U.S. history, the first part of U.S. history, which is 2010, and the second part, which is 2020. I also teach American popular culture, as well as Black Studies here at Northeast State.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, of course, this is Black History Month here in the month of February. And in my time of living, this has been the most time that I've seen the Black people uprise, the uproar in the world. And it seems like it has happened after the Ferguson massacre. How do you think that has influenced the Black society?
Well, I think it's two ways. One, you're concerned about the total picture of our country, and I think the other thing is we have to think through a couple of things. As far as I'm concerned, I don't change my view of a whole part of society because of what one or two people do. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't. I'm the kind of person that looks at individuals as individuals. And with law enforcement, I have a high respect for them because they put their lives on the line every day. And if one messes up, it doesn't make me think that all of them are bad. Just like I'm a minister. If one minister does something wrong, that doesn't mean all of us are that way.
The Reverend Charlton, the hands up, don't shoot movement has become very popular in the world. And what do you think about that? What are your thoughts? Do you think it's a positive influence?
Now, I'm not sure about that. I'm not. The hands up, don't shoot.
Hands up, don't shoot happened after the Ferguson with the police.
Oh, yeah.
And he had his hands up. And basically the Black people are saying, my hands are up, I surrender, don't shoot. Mm-hmm. And that has been a movement that has been going around in the Black culture, the Black society. And do you think that is something that is positive? Is that something we should be promoting?
Well, If I look at it from both sides of the picture of the police officer who doesn't know whether you're carrying a weapon or not, and the person who is there, just like I've had times when I've been stopped by policemen, and quite often they will say, "Keep your hands on the steering wheel." I said, "Okay," and I understand why, because if you move your hand, you could have anything down there. You could have another weapon. And by the only time the policeman would see the weapon was like that, when it's on them. So I can understand that.
Reverend Charlton, do you believe that over time, over history, of course, that the African American population has bettered. Do you think it has bettered? Of course, history has explained that it should get better. Do you think that it's gotten better?
The position of African Americans?
Exactly, yes.
I think it has. And one proof is that I'm sitting here instead of in an all-black school. And I teach my students we respect each other. I think it has come a long way. And yet there's always room for growth.
Mr. Patrick, the influence of blacks in modern society, is that positive or a negative influence?
I think it's been a positive influence. You know, if you look back many years ago, let's say the 50s or 60s, blacks were perceived in certain ways here in America. And one of the things I think we do that's positive as far as teaching black studies is that a majority of our students are not black who take the class. Sure. So we get a certain understanding of other cultures when I have these other students, white students who are in my class. They have certain stereotypes. Once they find out the achievement of black Americans, they sort of embrace that and get rid of some of the prejudice or stereotypes they've had in the past of black Americans.
Mr. Patrick, do you think America as a whole has lived up to Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech? Or is there room to grow?
There's always room to grow. I mean, I Have a Dream speech, it was a great speech, no doubt. I tend to like his mountaintop speech more because that's the one he did off the cuff. He didn't write it down, it sort of came from without. But he talked about in that one also that he didn't have to get there with us, but that we would get there one day. And just look at the world today. You have blacks who are on TV doing a lot of different things other than just sports. And plus we have a president and his wife.
Yes.
So yeah, I think things have gotten better, but things can improve. And we have to keep seeking that improvement. And like I said, by teaching black studies and have majority white students, things will improve because they will get a better understanding of a different culture maybe than their majority culture.
Reverend Charlton, for the past 8 years, we've had a black president in America. Why do you think it took so long?
I think that there had to be time for a seal of trust and respect for the knowledge base and respect for the character of the other person. I think that had to happen. And one of the thing crossed my mind a moment ago, one of the things I tell my students, as Brother Patrick says, most of our students in black studies are white, and that's wonderful. And I always tell them, don't let anybody put you on a guilt trip for what happened a couple hundred years ago, because sometimes that will happen. And I tell them, I say, you had nothing to do with slavery. You had nothing to do with any of that. So don't let anybody put you on a guilt trip, because it's not fair.
Mr. Patrick, do you think that the black president has been a positive influence on the world, or do you think that we can look past the race issue of it?
I think we can look past the race issue of it, and I think he's had a positive effect. One of his goals when he first came in, and if you listen to him now, is we have this relationship now with Cuba that probably never would have happened otherwise, and he'll be visiting there next month. You're also going to look at how he's actually brought us closer to some of the Middle Eastern countries rather than staying off, because the world, we're interlocked, the whole entire world now. And so, like I said, them seeing a different image of America, foreign countries seeing a different image of America, and him trying to be positive and opening relationships, those things are important and are positive, and actually will just make our country stronger and safer.
Mr. Patrick, on the topic of racial violence, how do you feel about the shooting massacre that happened in Charleston?
I saw it on the news, and it sort of shocked me at first because it happened in a church, and I was reminded of a church bombing many years ago down in Birmingham and those children. So it was sort of shocking, but you also got to remember, that was one person who did that. It didn't speak for that whole community. You know, he was sort of an enigma. He maybe had some problems that people should have understood but didn't understand. And so like I said, I can't blame the whole white community for that. But at the very same time, you saw that black community as well as the white community and the police all come together in that area.
Reverend Charles, during that shooting, when you heard about that, what was going through your mind?
I thought it was a terrible thing to have happen, and it also, as a pastor, it causes you to realize that you have to be careful with the lives of people and have security. You have to protect yourself because, as Mr. Patrick said, you can't blame everybody for what one person did, but you can try to find ways of hopefully preventing it again.
Mr. Patrick, why do you think that it's so important that we accept the differences in race in our society?
Well, let me put it this way. There would be no humankind if it hadn't been for the Africans, since we know that that's where life all started, coming out of that continent in migration. So really, the skin color might be different, but we're all still the same. Several years ago, we had someone come here and we were looking at race and genetics. We're 99.9% all the same. Mm-hmm. So skin color is probably the only thing that's different. Nothing other than that. So I really don't see a difference in people. I'm sort of like Rev here. I sort of judge individuals on how they are. I don't judge them by looking at a color of a skin.
Do you think, Mr. Patrick, that the media has put a positive or negative outlook on America together as a whole, not just on Black America, but America together with the racial issues?
I think the media tends to sometimes go a little overboard. They will sometimes show pockets of people who may be distressed, let's say living in a slum area, and they will show that over and over again, or they'll show a certain violence happening in a certain part of the country, or maybe now one of the things they've been showing is all these people who are coming over our border and those type things. And then you have politicians who are talking about different things to stop immigration in this country. But if you think about it, everyone in this country immigrated here from somewhere else, rather forced or not.
When you, in your classes, Reverend Charlton, how important is it that you engage white America in Black History Month?
I think it's important because it causes an appreciation of each other's, heritage, and basically when you look at it, we interact even in times when there was space between races or among races. We still had to interact with each other, and now much more so because things have changed quite a bit.
Reverend Charlton, what do you think inspires white students to take these Black Studies classes?
I think they wanted to learn more about people that they're in class with them, and I really enjoy my students. I really do, and we have a great time in class. And I, right from the beginning, I always make the statement that a couple of things we're going to do. A classroom is a culture, and by virtue of that fact, what we're going to do is we're not going to have any little funny little names to call each other. We're going to respect one another, and we're going to grow together, to learn together, and they reciprocate. We have a really good time there, and the other thing is. I know when I initially started teaching Black Studies, I ran into teachers who taught Black history, and some of them were very angry. And they talked about what they told their students. And that's why I made that statement that I mentioned earlier. But I tell my students, you have nothing to do with what happened in slavery. You weren't there. So don't let people blame you for it, And it works quite well, and it works because it's true. It's true. They weren't there.
Mr. Patrick, in the recent news, Stacey Dash has stated that she doesn't really see that there's a need for Black History Month. How does that statement make you feel?
I always laugh when I hear that because most of the year what we're doing is teaching Western civilization in some type. But you think about the fact that black Americans built this country. They made a contribution to this country, a huge contribution. Now, with that being said, you also got to look at what they brought to this country as far as culture. We do the arts. We were the first cowboys. We built railroads. We brought a language, and we even contribute to something called country music because the banjo is native to Africa. And so one of the things we do when we teach these students is they learn new things about, oh yeah, I never knew that, or that this black man invented a golf tee, or that this black man invented this thing called a stoplight that helped us with safety, or even with Garrett Morgan, who came up with the idea of the respirator that firemen use now. So those things are important, and it's good that these students learn it, and they're excited about learning those things.
Mr. Patrick, why do you think that those aren't things that we talk about in general? You know, why do we have to take a class for that?
Well, it's pretty much been left out of U.S. history in the U.S. history books. They will mention maybe Frederick Douglass one time. They might mention Harriet Tubman, and they'll mention, let's say, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. But those are the only folks that have been put into the history books, and so some of it might be the publishers. And maybe by us doing this Black Studies, it'll push publishers of the regular U.S. history books to be more inclusive, not just of Black Americans, but Hispanic Americans and what they bought, as well as Native Americans, Chinese Americans, well, basically all humans and what we brought to one another here in the United States.
Reverend Charlton, you know, speaking of history, if Dr. King was alive today and he has witnessed what is happening in America, what do you think he would say?
I'm smiling when you ask that question because I ask my students that in Black Studies. What do you think Dr. King would say? I think he would be pleased with the growth, the things that have occurred, the positive things, and probably would, in the process of conversation, of sharing with people, he would share ideas in order that would facilitate people growing closer and closer together to each other. Because and we have to realize too as Americans that there are people in this world who don't like Americans, no matter which American you are. And that we have to be close, we have to work together for for the freedom and the existence of our nation.
Reverend Charlton, why do you think there has been a large amount of violence with these racial issues instead of coming together?
I think it depends on the person. Whereas I would sit down with someone and say, let's look at this issue, let's talk this out. Another person may not. They may say, well, I've had it, I've seen enough of this, I'm tired of this, I'm going to just blow up. And that never helps anything. That never helps anything. I've served time in politics, and in that you get more done when you ask each other civil questions and talk it through than you do yelling at each other, because that's forgotten now.
Mr. Patrick, the police shootings against blacks, do you think that's an attack on blacks? Or do you think they are doing it for their purpose, to serve us, to protect us?
I don't think it's necessarily an attack on blacks. What I think more than anything about that, when I really think about it, is these police officers may be fearful for their own safety, and they may have acted rashly, you know, and acted too fast and shot too fast. Maybe those are things that we should look at as well, and the training that they get. As far as the reaction to them, I think you have to sometimes speak up. If this is what's bothering you as a people, let's speak up. But like I said, there are incidents, but you can't blame the whole police department for something that one or two did. And maybe it's the culture of that police department. We don't know. I can't say 100% because I'm not within that culture. I can say this as far as the culture here in this area. I've actually seen blacks and whites work together much better maybe than some other places.
Reverend Charlton, do you think that the way we are, as a black community, are responding to the police shootings, do you think it's a positive response, or is there another route that we can go about it?
I think we need to put in place methodology to be able to understand each other better. And one of the things, just to walk in the other person's shoes for a moment and ask yourself, if you were an officer of the law and you'd had a tough day, and it's just been tough, you've had to arrest 4 or 5 people, and you've been called everything that you could think of, and they've threatened you. They couldn't do anything because you had the weapon. And then all of a sudden you run into a situation and you feel like, well, you maybe subconsciously feel like, wonder what this person is going to do. And they make the wrong move. And I'm not saying it's right to shoot first and ask questions later either. But what I'm saying is, if I never come to a point of seeking to understand why a person does something, I'll never be able to help prevent it. If I come to that point, and say, okay, now let's decide what can we do positively to make a change take place. That hopefully that will never happen again.
Mr. Patrick, what advice would you give to Black America just to kind of improve us?
I think we should always have someone called like a mentor. For instance, I chose Dr. Charlton to be my mentor. I don't know if one can do that, but I've chosen him to do that. But so that you learn from others who've been through experiences, throughout time. One of the African ways was that you studied up under someone. You were a neophyte, and so you studied up under this master until you were ready to actually go out and be able to teach other folks what the master had taught you. So that you come together as a community by letting the elders. See, we had no such word, there was no such word in Africa as something called an orphan, because we didn't have any orphans. We didn't throw old people away. And I think that needs to be part of the culture of Black America, that we continue this family where the young children can learn from their grandparents or great-grandparents. That's the way I was brought up anyway. So I think that's a positive that we could move towards, keeping the family together.
Mr. Patrick, do you believe that Black America can learn from white America?
Like I said, once again, I don't know if I don't see America as in black and white. I think we have a shared culture. We've always had a shared culture in this country. Blacks, of course, came with Columbus, even though he never set foot on North America. But we have a shared culture, so we can always learn from one another, because we are intertwined. And there's no other way to do it and be successful as a country other than to learn from one another and accept one another.
Reverend Charlton, what advice would you give to Black America?
I would say it's what Sherman has said is very good, because when I was called to ministry, I had a pastor that was fantastic, and it was just such a blessing to have him to work with me, because he left no stone unturned in helping me to become a minister and to do it right. I think it is so important that we listen to people. Wisdom doesn't, we get education, we get knowledge from college. Wisdom comes from from learning how to function in that real world out there. And we can get that from people who've lived a while, because they've seen things. And what I used to do when I was a little boy, I'd sit on the porch, and I call them front porch talks. My dad and I had them till he died. I'd sit on the porch, and you can imagine about this big, with a little car. And like I was driving the car, and when somebody would ask me something, I'd always make them have to touch me or whatever to get my attention that they already had, so I could learn some things from them. So I'm doing like this, and they said, see, he's not even listening. And then they would really get deep into some things in life that I would not have heard before. Definitely wouldn't have heard it at that time. But I learned from them, and I think that's important. You can't bury the brain and expect to continue to think.
Reverend Charlton, Black Lives Matter. What does that mean to you?
That just simply means that I don't know what that is supposed to mean, really. I'm thinking about it. I don't know how that is in the organization, whatever. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the goal is. Black lives do matter. All lives matter. I don't think anybody's life should be taken for granted, and all of them matter. But I think that probably it may mean that somebody may think that someone thinks that it doesn't matter, but it does.
Mr. Patrick, what are your thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement?
I would sort of go with Dr. Charlton on this. I've not been part of the movement, therefore, I sort of hesitate to comment too much on it, but I will say this, I do believe all lives matter. Maybe that's what it's trying to say, that not only does white life matter, but black life matter, but Hispanic life matter. Like I said, I'm not part of the movement, but I understand that people may be frustrated, and maybe this is the way they're getting out the frustration. And I'd rather have people marching, saying Black Lives Matter than to turn violent and turn against one another.
Yes.
Mr. Patrick, what do you think have caused us to separate Black Lives Matter from All Lives Matter?
I think part of it has been maybe some political rhetoric over time, over the last few years, when we've sort of stepped back and divided, based on politics, that this person's more important than this person. And some of our politicians maybe need to tone down some of what they're saying, in trying to divide people, and even our congressmen and senators, they've said some things that maybe has divided the country. And so when you look at the leadership, has the leadership been there to bring us together rather than to tear us apart?
Thank you. Thank you. We'll be back in just a moment to wrap up Direction Northeast.
My name is Ann Ravel. I'm an actress, and I got my start at Northeast State Community College. Just as acting truly allows me to express myself and learn new things about myself, my whole experience at Northeast State has allowed me to do that. I've found new interests, new hobbies, new passions that I would have never known had I not come here. Northeast State gave me a quality education, amazing friendships, but most importantly, it allowed me to discover who I want to be.
That concludes the program for today. We've taken a look at the way changes in culture may have changed the vision of racial harmony expressed by Dr. Martin Luther King. Community is very important to the students at Northeast State Community College, and this program takes a look at a few of the subjects they find important. Until we meet again, on behalf of the students, staff, and faculty of Northeast State Community College, I'm Montez Berg, and this is Direction Northeast.